Now in this video, what I want to do is explain to you how we have this epidemic of men dropping out of society, and I wanted to consider to what extent are these men selfish men, are they making smart decisions, and we're going to get the opinion of everyone's favorite tradcon or tradcuck. His name's Charlie Kirk. He's on Fox News running through the normal spiel, but let's see what he has to say here.
The downfall of regular masculine norms in our country, or the assault on free speech, the overly politically correct culture, or the downfall of blue-collar jobs and the rise in pink-collar jobs. The Democrats have a much bigger problem than them just trying to film themselves bench pressing. It's much more structural and much deeper.
Let's go into some of that.
That was a very short clip to start with, right? But he was trying to frame why are men dropping out of society, right? Or dropping out the workplace. Specifically, of course, there's mainly a channel aimed at careers and finance pertaining to men, right? Now, I think he's making some good points there, briefly saying, well, you have a general negative perception and narrative around men in society, whether it's not just the workplace or in the gym. You can be cancelled for looking at the woman the wrong way or holding women accountable in any way, shape or form in the workplace. And then also, like I said, the term toxic or problematic or misogynistic, patriarchal, all of those terms are overused and lost all meaning because they're just used anyway to attack men behaving like men, essentially, right? And I think an important point he just briefly mentioned here was the assault on free speech, politically correct culture. I think part of men socializing with each other involves jokes that would be politically incorrect and maybe a bit of banter, a bit of making jokes about each other that could be perceived as insults, but it's just the way they're socializing. And if you create a society where there's a lot of cancel culture, lots of false allegations or accusations, where any joke could be turned into a harassment claim, you're going to have less men participating in that type of society, right? Not just at work or in the gym or in any social environment, broadly speaking. He says there's a downfall of blue-collar jobs that are seen as low status, like men working in the trades. And the truth is, a lot of those jobs are, of course, important to a functioning society, having plumbers, electricians, construction workers, but they are perceived as lower status. Even in some cases, there'd be higher pay than a guy who's working in an office, doing a pointless office job. So I think there's a fair point there in terms of men dropping out of society because they're doing hard work, they're doing real work that is maintaining this failed society and propping it up on their own backs of their hard work, and they're not getting as much special treatment as maybe a guy who has no morals or ethics and he's doing a low quality office job and pretending to be busy, or a female who'd be artificially propped up in a position of management just because she's a woman, right? Now, he's talking about that in addition to the fall of men in white collar jobs. So white collar jobs, of course, would be jobs whereby it's working in the office, and obviously there's less men working in the office because of course now you have a lot of these type of environments whereby there's gender hiring quotas, there's gender promotion quotas that favor women, less efficient work done by a lot of that demographic because they're not the best choice for the job. They've been selected for the job or selected for the promotion to management based on targets to hire and promote them, right? So then you're going to have more inefficient and unproductive work being done because you haven't hired the best person for the job, which in some cases could be a man, but they refuse to put a man in that position because they want more women in positions of leadership, right? And then he's talking about the rise of pink collar jobs, which I'm going to come on to later. And a lot of these jobs are like pointless office jobs, right? Jobs that people say that the office is daycare for adults. And a lot of these pink collar jobs, so jobs that women are doing, are busybody jobs in the office, which we'll get onto later, like being a HR coordinator or DEI officer, project coordinator, things like that, customer experience specialist. And these are all type of jobs that are just caregiving jobs that are just not needed. They're just like made up jobs that you see some DEI hires working in typically, right? So we're going to come on to more different videos. We've got a perspective of Charlie Kirk here, but we also got a perspective of someone else who's a man who's an older white guy, white American, who's I think is in his late 30s or early 40s. And he's kind of dropped out of society. He's taken the steps that are needed in order to be more independent. From what I understand, he doesn't go into his job in too many details, but he works in some kind of manual labor, some kind of trades. I think something like installing solar panels, or helping people do some property development, and he's decided to pivot his life while focusing on those tasks to live more in a rural area, in the country area, because he doesn't want to be around, mega cities and major environments where you've got highly densely populated people, more prone to riots and protests and things like that. He wants more of a peaceful life and sacrificing social status and things like that. He doesn't mind doing that, right? So we're going to get his perspective in a moment, right? Living in a cabin, being a minimalist, being one of the men dropping out of society. It's not just young men dropping out of society like Fox News or Charlie Kirk is talking about here. It's more so just men in general of all demographics. You'd be surprised, right? Now, if you're a man and you're thinking society's draining your time, your money, your loyalty, and they're giving you nothing back in return when you're working for these corporations, I help my clients to break free from the broken social contract, to escape these pink collar traps and build real independence in a system that's rigged against you, right? So click the description if you want to start working with me one-to-one with career coaching, so I can help you secure more power, pay, and freedom. Now, going back to this guy, Steve James, let's listen to his perspective here.
When we live in a society and culture that doesn't reward loyalty, because loyalty is a two-way street. And anybody that is ever trying to scam you, rip you off, manipulate you in any way, shape, or form will always promote a form of loyalty that never ever provides back to the person that is demonstrating the loyalty. It's ultimately screwing you over and leaving you in a position where you have no resources, you have no personal peace, you are just literally getting used over and over again, and they are promoting a form of ideology and brainwashing that will get you to a point to where all you ever do is give and everything is taken from you. Now, I realize for many of us, we've grown up in a culture where we do understand the art of sacrifice and serving people, the art of selflessness, which is something I absolutely support. At the same time, in the world that used to value that to certain degrees, and there's no perfect version of any situation that we're thinking of here where this ever worked out perfectly. So I have no misconceptions that I think that sometime in the past things were absolutely perfect. There's no euphoric recall going on here, but it used to be a period in time where it was a bit more understood, I think, to a certain extent. But regardless of whether or not what you think about the past, one thing is absolutely certain. The way it is going today is not working. It does not work at all. I'll start right in with talking about the job situation where you could, this day and age, if you're not literally doing job hopping constantly all over the place, you're utterly and completely replaceable. And being that you're utterly and completely replaceable, they bump you out as quick as they possibly can once you reach a certain age limit, and they try to get rid of you, and they're trying to constantly replace you. And now it wasn't just younger people that were coming up that they were willing to put in there at a much lower salary and show literally no loyalty, because that has now ended as of pretty much the 80s, 90s, and maybe early 2000s. The thought of staying with a company long-term, having a pension or anything like that, having any form of retirement or being treated well by that company, that's gone.
Right, so before we continue on this, what we're going to do is actually go through a bit of what this guy's saying. So essentially, you're saying, why should we be loyal to this system, right? In the sense he's talking about corporations. But one thing I realized about this society, broadly speaking, is loyalty is always expected of men, but never offered to men. You can't expect loyalty from a woman in a relationship when the divorce rate is 50%, 70% initiated by a woman in terms of those divorces. Then you can't expect loyalty from companies, because companies will hire you and fire you, and they're less likely to keep you employed, particularly if you're a straight man, right? Because you're not part of the quotas they want in positions of power. And then also when it comes to governments, right? Governments lie to all of us all the time, higher taxes. They take your tax money and put it into global conflict you don't want to have any involvement in. They're threatening, you're sending out little signals and rumors throughout the media that there could be an upcoming global conflict and they might need to restart the conscription for men. So there's all these type of little mind games they're playing with you, and they're testing the water. Can we get these men that we've already made demoralized and disillusioned and disaffected, can we drag them over to a global conflict in the Middle East or wherever it would be? And they're testing the water for that, because they not only did they ruin your life by destroying the middle class and ruin your life by making housing unaffordable, and ruin your life by making healthy families affordable, ruin your life by brainwashing kids, and ruin your life by making the money unaffordable, and ruin your life by making getting a promotion more difficult, and progressing your life through social mobility, and ruin your environment by mass migration and all types of other social dysfunction, and ruin any sense of community. They've even ruined the culture of consumerism that they made themselves, the system, consumerism, materialism, by making everything low quality, and the culture and the media is terrible. Bred in circuses in the Roman Empire, they say people bred in circuses to keep them distracted, food and entertainment. But now the food sucks, it's low quality poison, and then the circuses, the entertainment, the Netflix and all of that has been poisoned by wokeness and all these brainwashing ideologies you see from the leftist Marxist technocrats. So it's like, okay, well, you've ruined everything now, so all they want to do after they ruined your life is to send you off to wood chipper, send you off to gassed in some kind of global conflict, so get glassed, if you're familiar with that term. So this is what the system's done, right? So you shouldn't be loyal to the system, right? And he's making smart decisions for himself. He's not trying to save the world, but the whole point is you need to find personal solutions for yourself. And this guy's personal solution for him, which was moving to a low cost of living location, living in a cabin, spending more time in nature. And you're going to see more men dropping out of society. It's not going to be the stereotype of what we see in Japan, where it's guys staying at home and they're playing video games all the time. They never leave the house, and they get their groceries delivered and they just stay indoors all day and their house looks like a complete mess. No, you're just going to see guys who might have a 1-bedroom apartment in a major city, or they're renting, or they're living super minimalist. They're moving out to the country and living off grid on some savings, or maybe their inheritance, or move abroad. That's what you're going to see. And it's just going to become a creeping trend. You see a lot of it. A lot of these guys, they're not making YouTube videos about it like me, right? Or this guy, Steve James. They're doing it quietly, and then you see it in the statistics. 7 million men are out the workforce and they're working age and they're capable of working. What's going on there? Are they just all crypto millionaires? Did they have some savings and investments, or they inherited some money from their family and they're going to invest it and just live super low cost? All of a sudden, the UK has a mass exodus of multimillionaires because of the tax regimes changed to make taxes higher for them. You're just going to see smaller things, the same way things are getting slowly worse and worse. There's a metaphor out there called boiling frogs, which is what the system's doing. They're taking a frog that's alive, which would be you, they're putting you in warm water and they're slowly turning up the temperature to boil you, right? And what the system's doing is boiling the frogs too fast, right? People actually right? They're not slowly getting lulled into a sense of warmth and comfort. They're waking up because things are getting so bad so quickly, right? And this is a thing about avoiding corporate Kool-Aid, which, going back to careers and things like that, don't kid yourself. If you overwork yourself, you're going to get promoted. You have to learn the kind of office politics and the nature of that game, which I cover in my coaching, but also throughout I have a training course called Career Code, and I help you master office politics and protect your career through a lot of those lessons. So if you're interested in that, that could also help you out. And if we go back to this guy, right? So what he's also talking about here is relationships, right? Nice guys being simps. And if you see the title of the video, right, which has 2K views, we don't owe loyalty to institutions or relationships that don't serve us or give back to us, right? This is kind of a clear message. He's saying that essentially, these guys, they're focused on overextending themselves. The same way they're being a simp in a relationship, they're being a simp in a corporate dynamic, right? So what ends up happening is, you deal with that. Now in relationships, it could be spinning multiple plates, which would be having multiple women in relationships at the same time. Or in a corporation sense, it'd be, job hopping regularly. So you're not a replaceable cog in a machine, right? You're not sacrificing your youth and ending up old and suffering, or middle management position with lots of debt and having dynamics. You owe yourself earlier in your life. You've got to have an escape plan, an exit plan. Now, I've seen some people do that successfully at some investment banks I worked at, after working 20 years or so at a major investment bank, mainly because of their savings and investments, but also they had quite wealthy husbands. There were two women who were working at quite senior roles. They made a ton of money, and then they essentially moved to do some travel with their husbands, right? So they had an exit plan there. So you're going to see more and more men have exit plans too. And the exit plan won't be, obviously, depending on a woman in a relationship, these guys will just say, okay, well, I can live for dirt cheap, right, in my hometown, even though it's overflown with migrants and crime and whatever. I'll just live my life low key. I don't really care. I'll just have whatever money I have from savings and maybe do a low quality job just to make a little money extra on the side. And guys are noticing this, right? Like, what's the difference in lifestyle between, so the lower end of middle class and the higher end of middle class? And the only real difference is the guy at the higher end of the middle class can just save and invest more to maybe retire early or have some small lifestyle benefits. But the middle class is being compressed. So like, there's an interesting video I might cover another where a guy was talking about, what's the difference between making 70K a year and 200K a year? And the really difference is that you can invest a lot more at the higher end, right? You're going to have to pay more tax. You have a more stressful job, less free time, but you're going to be able to invest more so you can retire slightly earlier, or you have slightly better quality food and things like that, maybe a higher quality gym, go to nicer nightclubs and things. But if you're not focused on materialism and consumerism, you're going to upscale your lifestyle a bit in terms of clothes and nutrition and gym and things like that, and you're a single guy. So it's just small lifestyle benefits. So as the middle class gets compressed, more and more men are going to be like, well, what's the difference between being paying retail employee with some savings I've got and doing what I want in my free time and maxing my free time out, rather than being a corporate wagey, right? It's going to be a wagey one end or the other. So there's a very interesting dynamic there. Let's go back and listen to Kirk.
This is a poll that came out by the Financial Times, Charlie, of what's happening with young men. Now, there's a lot of great hope out there for young men, Charlie. You're out there with Turning Point USA. I actually have teenage boys, so I actually see some hope with younger men. But we have to go through this first, which shows not just the U.S., but U.K., Canada, and France. And it's young men between the age of 20 and 24, that's what you see on your screen, who are choosing, it has to be the word choice, neither to work, look for work, or to get an education. So that number in the U.S. rising up to 10%, you can see in the U.K. it's up towards 15%, of young men basically, Charlie, checking out.
They are checking out. They are the lost boys of the West, and this is worthy of a longer conversation. But really quick, they're checking out largely because the entire society has become hostile to them. They've been told that they were toxically masculine. You look at, for example, in the United Kingdom, they had an entire documentary, not even a documentary, a movie called Adolescence, that was all about that young white Christian boys are somehow a threat to the entire country. And the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, praised that movie as much watched for the entire country. We see it all throughout our nation as well. This is a major problem because it also is surfacing, and we're in the dating pool as well. Marriage rates are down, fertility rates are down, and the emphasis of the point needs to be made. It's the young men that are voluntarily checking out of society. This means that their psychology is broken, Will.
Yes.
That means that their mindset is broken. We have economics problems, but it's something more than that. It is soul crushing, which is why one of the things that has given me hope, I know you've covered this beautifully, is that young men are starting to go back to church. That is the most important thing. As they start to give more of their lives to Jesus Christ and put God first, they'll have more purpose and more why rather than checking out of society.
I think you're absolutely right, Charlie. It is what you saw on your screen with that chart isn't structural in terms of the lack of jobs. That's part of a bigger picture. But this, at this end, is a choice, which is psychological. And that psychological effect is a combination of things, Charlie, that you point out. It's a lack of faith. It's also being taught to be soft, not to be manly, to wallow in your trauma, to be constantly in the self-analysis phase, to lose purpose, to not put one foot in front of the other. It's all of these things that are a break in the psychology of young men. And you ultimately have people who are not men of action. Not like you, Charlie, because we saw you on Fox and Friends Weekend.
So they're going to go into a bit of a diatribe, which I'm not going to include, about how he was, I don't know, doing some horse riding or golf or whatever nonsense, Kirk does in his spare time. So what we're going to talk about is the points they're making, right? And had an interesting graph just about here. Okay, cool. So let's talk about men not working or men checking out, right? So firstly, this is a talking point online because men can't speak freely in social environments, out IRL, in real life, in meet space. Essentially, so you have to be online. So you have men in different forums, some of you might remember the Roosh V forum, which was infamous, but he would talk about traveling. And before Passport Bros, there'd be lots of content there about traveling to different countries and what the dating experiences were like there, and the differences between women in different countries. And there's a bit about investing and entrepreneurship and being a man, going his own way, and on things like that. And I'm sure there's other forums out there. There's right-wing Twitter, of course. There's 4chan and Poll. There's other online sites, and are celibate, if you want to use that word, who have their own forums. There's all types of hidden corners of the internet where, because men can't discuss any detailed analysis of how society works in public forums or even some social media spaces, they have to end up being on different small parts of the internet, and they end up finding each other because that's the only time or place they can express themselves. And the thing is, men maintain society, right? If you look back at Roman Empire, I'm not an expert on that time period, but from what I know is that when men abandoned civilization, they stopped participating in it, things quickly crumbled, right? There's a term called lost boys, right, in terms of men dropping out. Now, the thing is, what are those lost boys going to do, which is quite interesting, right? The stereotype, they're just going to stay at home and play video games. And I don't think that's what's going to happen. Normally, men, right, who drop out, they go through a phase of essentially escapism, right? That could be watching TV shows, that could be just watching anime, playing video games, just any form of escapism. And I'm not saying any of those things are necessarily bad if you want to, read about that. And what ends up happening is after a phase of that, you develop a level of comfort and peace with your situation, given how society's been destroyed by the powers of the elite or whatever. Then you start thinking, okay, well, I'll accept whatever my fate is right now, but who actually messed up everything? Why do things suck? And you do some research, you do some reading some books, you start looking into different protocols, you start looking into different religious texts, conspiracy symbols and things like that, and you're like, and then you figure out, why do they push women to the workplace? Why are men being pushed out? Why there's certain focuses on different racial issues or religious issues? Why are certain conflicts going on in the Middle East? And why is America involved in that? What's going on? Who's pulling who's did things like that? And that's what ends up happening, right? And then what ends up happening at the end of that acceptance phase, if you want to talk about the 5 stages of grief, going through being upset and then having acceptance at the end, men fall down the self-improvement rabbit hole, which could be fitness, it could be martial arts and weightlifting, and it's reading books and philosophy, and then they end up developing themselves, not to do what society wants them to do, in the sense that society's expectation for men is that, you develop yourself to make yourself more palatable to be a better corporate employee. You've done your MBA. You don't make yourself more, you don't develop yourself in terms of being more emotionally available so you can be a dog on a leash, a simp on a string for a GF who's focused on her career, right? You end up becoming your own man with your own purpose. And that's what this system fears, right? And the system's like, no, you got to play your role. We're going to keep beating you with a stick and you're going to keep having to play your role, right? And this brings me on to one of my images, which is this one, right? The current social dynamic depends on castrated and censored men. And that's what this system's realizing. We're not going to be able to keep these men castrated and censored for too much longer, right? They push these weird celebrities like Ed Sheeran, who was wearing makeup in one of his music videos, Drake wearing painted fingernails, right? This type of effeminate agenda is deliberately part of the secret societies that push these type of on men who are really propping up this society, whether it's men doing essential work like firemen, construction, carrying the burden of picking up work for the inefficient boomers and girl bosses in the office. All these guys are kind of waking up now thinking, okay, well, why wouldn't that, right? And they're going to figure out their own things. And I see this all the time. I see loads of guys just going like, you know what, my career's not going anywhere. So I'm just focused on my health and fitness. And I might be an average earner. I might be earning below average income or slightly above average income, but it's not really going to improve, right? Unless, I can look at your different options and find the best path for you and push in that direction. But what these guys might do is they'll go, okay, cool, well, if financial situation's not going to get better, maybe I'll just focus on maximizing my social skills and fitness and take it from there. Or I could become a good philosopher. I'll develop other skills that you can't measure necessarily in terms of money, right? Because everything in this society is based around the economic growth. Line must go up. A man has to have a 6-figure salary. And some guys are saying, well, I don't really care about that anymore. And I get it. I understand the different perspectives here. And that's what a lot of the lost boys are are going to do. It's not just going to be staying at home playing video games, right? It might be leaving the country, as we discussed before, right? The marriage and fertility, the social contract is broken, right? We know, like I say, the marriage statistics, less and less people married, high divorce rates, fertility in terms of people having kids is going down. So there's lots of social factors. We can't put it all on, oh, the economy, AI is taking jobs, the interest rates are high, companies not investing. And then the other thing he's talking about here is men are voluntarily dropping out. It's not because of a health issue or something like that. And there is true, they're voluntarily dropping out, but it's a bit deeper than that. What it is that men are having a series of bad experiences. It's one bad experience after the other. An economic bad experience, getting rejected for job, going promotion and the woman gets promoted over you time and time again. You see women getting special treatment at work and a lack of accountability there. You go to work hard and the baby boomer what they're doing and you have to pick up their slack. You're in social you're constantly told you can't have that opinion, you can't look at a woman that way, you can't do this. So you have one bad economic experience after the other, one layoff back after the other, one difficult hiring experience after the other, one bad social experience after the other, one bad date after the other. Even between men you might have this passive aggressive competition, so you have a hard time making friends, right? And there's no escape, and then it feels like a spiritual war, right? And in a sense you could say there is a spiritual war going on in this society between good and evil, the people who are pro-freedom, people who are pushing coercive control. I think what's happening is that's why a lot of men are looking more into religion. You might have noticed in recent years, particularly on the conservative right, there are more and more men who are becoming more right-wing, looking into Christian values like the Eastern Orthodox, the kind of more traditional Christianity. This is deeper than just, there's a bit of bias against men, or the government lies a bit, it's a bit corrupt. It's a lot deeper than that. It does feel like a spiritual war, like that's the nicest way I can put it. Of course, not just in a peaceful sense, in a spiritual sense. But let me know in the comments, what do you feel about the spiritual aspect of this dynamic we're dealing with, right? Is it about a spiritual conflict? Because like I say, obviously this is a career and finance channel. I'm not going to get into politics and religion and all of contentious issues too much, but I do think there's a deeper element going on here. Now, in the term of, men should be soft and things like that, I would say it's not about men being soft and that's why they're dropping out. It's more so men escaping a rigged social contract. They've done a logical decision. I think men who are dropping out are being logical. They're looking at the job market. They might be looking at the relationship dynamics. They're like, I am better off playing video games at home. I am better off just going to the gym every day, making do with what money I can and, be the hell myself and be the smartest version of myself. But it doesn't matter if I work hard in my job. That's going to change my situation. I'll just make the best of whatever situation I've got right now financially and try to ride it out. Now, there's a lot of terms here in terms of, Charlie Kirk, right at the end of that little clip. Oh, Charlie Kirk, he's a man of action. But if you're not familiar with Charlie Kirk, he is of quite wealthy family. He had a network of billionaires to invest in his conservative action group or tank type of activity, whereby they operate in colleges and universities to promote conservative values and things like that, which aren't necessarily bad things. But the point is, this guy being some kind of inspirational figure to others is kind of alive, is born into that wealth that he has, right? Sometimes I wonder if take a Charlie Kirk, and this is interesting thought experiment, next time you're bored at work and want to daydream about something, think about how some of these Nepo babies would do if they were in your situation. I think a lot of them will crack. Also, think about a lot of baby boomers, right? We all have parents who, may have incorrect life advice, who may be telling you, oh, you should just, get another job. You should just find another woman to be in a relationship with, even though the marriages are not working out for most people. And I'm like, how would they deal with it? How would a baby boomer deal with being a working age, military age society? I think a lot of them would end themselves, right? They would exit their lives, right? They'd realize how difficult it is with the job market, the social dynamics. How would a girl boss, how would a woman behave in this society if she was a man? She'd really struggle. Same thing with all these other demographics getting special treatment, unlike you, right? The burden, the tax society, the functioning aspects of society is all dependent on men holding it up, right? Stability depends on smart and strong men propping it up, picking up for the mistakes of the others, picking up for the big girl bosses, the lying corrupt politicians, paying the bulk of the tax burden, like I say, right? But now men are deciding they're not going to prop it up, and that's what you see. Like, social stability is a thin layer of ice. And that ice is crumbling, right? All it takes is one demographic, any demographic. It could be the working class men in Britain. It could be any group of military age men, any race or religion in the West, who are in large enough numbers, who said, I've had enough. The social instability is going to kick off, right? And it doesn't have to be that demographic. We could pick any demographic, right? Because we've got such a diverse situation in the West, and there's some issues that come with diversity, different groups not getting along. But any working age, military age group of men who are in sizable numbers, I would say above 100,000, and there are different demographics that can fit that of different races or religions, that say we are done participating in this system. It's done. It's over. It doesn't matter how many politicians and how many, armed and police force. It's over. Their system's over. But that's why they have to keep all men in particular, but people in general, isolated and fighting against and competing with each other like rats in a maze. Because if they were united, even in a smaller number, relatively small, 100,000 working age, military age men, it'd be done for the government, for the central banking system. You're printing money out, worthless paper money. It's done for that. It's done for these, evil corporations, how to label them. Of course, I don't condone anyone getting together and doing anything like that, because that wouldn't be very social stable, right? We'll support social stability, don't we? But you have to just bear in mind, a lot of these guys, they're talking getting paid millions of dollars each year, and they're not really going to change anything. Now, what is going on, right? So if men are exiting society, who is actually taking their place? And there's lots of those white collar jobs who are now pink collar jobs, right? In the classic definition is pink collar jobs would be jobs women would work stereotypically, which could be working as nurses, doing kind of secretarial work, which still does exist. But a lot of the pink collar jobs that now exist in the corporate environment are pointless office jobs, BS jobs, if you're familiar with that term, where they essentially aren't really needed. A HR coordinator who's doing like kind of pointless paperwork, things that could be easily automated, being an executive assistant, which you could say is to a certain extent is needed, where senior management might need an assistant to organize calendar and travel and things like that. They rarely focus on core business outcomes. DEI officers, tons of HR, just waste of space, right? Then you've got project coordinators, which, like I say, could be needed to an extent, but a lot of it is just sending emails and pointless admin and bureaucracy that could be automated. Or if you use an effective project management tool like Monday, there's all these different tools you can use. Kanban, Flow, you've all familiar with like Agile and Scrum and different type of project management tools around that, where you don't necessarily need a project coordinator. You could just have a few meetings and maybe one team member who's doing actual day-to-day work. A junior team member has a bit of spare time to organize some of the admin, but you have a lot of pink collar jobs where women are working these jobs, very high paying six-figure jobs, and not doing a lot of work. You've got customer specialists who just like fill up service about what clients are saying and their complaints. Like I say, some of these jobs are kind of needed, but they're kind of overblown and a bit unnecessary and could be automated or handled by other employees or shared between different people. So, like I say, there's a lot to it than Charlie the Kirk would say. Let's go to James, right? So this is a guy, late 30s, early 40s, dropping out. So it's not just young men dropping out because they're, like society, young men as Gen Z are weak and effeminate and soft. It's not really that. It's a lot deeper than that.
All of that. We don't owe loyalty to any company, to anything out there, any institution, including even our own government, that is not serving us well. If they don't serve us well, we don't owe them a thing. And I realize there are people that will look at this like, well, Steve, serving isn't something back. Yeah, well, there is someone that you need to have. You can preach unconditional love, but usually the people that preach unconditional love are the ones that intend to manipulate that. We're not talking about a God or a religious thing. We're talking about human beings going around misusing the concept of unconditional love, misusing the concept of serve over, also that they can benefit off of it and manipulate and warp the way things work. Because
so just to that point, right? So, I've discussed, men aren't getting return for their loyalty, but also we see this across racial demographics, across age groups, across a variety of situations. So it could be men at work, they've been loyal to a company for 5 years, still not getting promoted. They're in a relationship with a woman and it's kind of breaking down and they have a dead bedroom relationship, right? You might have people who are men who are friends with other social groups and they're getting ridiculed and they're sick of being talking down to like a second class, right? Then they start to think like, what am I getting returned for this loyalty? And unconditional love doesn't exist for men, right? There's a famous joke that went viral multiple times by Chris Rock where he talks about, unconditional love in a woman or, pet dogs, puppies, right? It doesn't really exist for men, right? There's no unconditional love for men. If he doesn't fulfill a purpose in that relationship, normally financial, he's not treated well, right? So then get zero loyalty from this society, and you see a coming up, you can see the kind of breaking point in terms of this society collapsing because there's too many men who are realizing this at the same time. They're all realizing this, like, oh, it's not going to work out with this current I'm dealing with, right? So, with governments, loyalty to single mothers and give them lots of benefits, gives loyalty to migrants through giving them free housing so they can have big families while you get taxed to pay for their kids and you can't afford to buy a house or have a family. This government shows loyalty to global conflict. You don't support. The government shows loyalty to the rainbow flag community you're not a part of if you're watching my channel, most likely. And then the government shows loyalty to working age, military age, straight men, right? Media, culture, gaming, even though it's now focused on pandering to those different demographics and not you. Companies, when it layoffs, hiring, promotions, performance reviews, they're worrying about gender discrimination lawsuits. I actually spoke with a member of HR at one of these top investment banks when I was there, and they said one of the reasons they care so much about how women are being treated at workplace is because there's been many successful gender discrimination lawsuits and they don't want to be on the receiving end of that. That's why they're extra careful about that. Now there's zero accountability and holding them responsible because again, it's the downstream from culture, right? The way corporations act, the way culture is, and the way politics works is all downstream from this kind of leftist culture, which is quite anti-male. Now, also, like I say, this guy's not a young guy, right? All men across different demographics are realizing they're getting nothing out of society. So they're planning what to do next in their life, which is dropping out in one way, shape, or form.
Everything that comes into your life needs to give as much as it takes. If everything about what you are being shown and the ideology that we're being shown, which I have to say is kind of I'm wondering how you were noticing this too, but the prevailing ideology here in the West is that, hey, you need to spend all your time serving, you need to be selfless, and it's always about you needing to. I often notice this when the celebrities want to lecture everybody on who's how many flights you take, and you notice that they're flying all over the place in private jets like there's no tomorrow. They want to lecture us on the environment when they are the chiefest of offenders when it comes to that. Rules for thee, not for me, to bend and serve. We do what we want. And it is time that enough people wake up to that and realize that is not the way things can be. This cannot move forward this way. We need to be making a stand against all of that as much as possible. I'm not going to go too much further into this. I'll probably, at least this time, but we'll see about the subject again and coming back and seeing what y'all think depending on your responses here. But I am curious, how do you all feel about this? Do you feel like we are in a culture, in a history really, where people are being pushed to serve, but getting an equal amount of return? And it's never going to be completely equal, but there are boundaries and realistic expectations that have to be met. It's important that they are. So I'm curious how many of you feel like, especially when it comes to just the living situation here in the West, here in the United States, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. They want everybody to serve and get crushed, but they are not interested in what needs to be done from the government's end, even if it's not being involved in certain things. Literally taxing us right into the ground, and then we don't know where the money's being spent, and when it does start to get exposed. And I'm not ideologically party, but you have to be a damn fool this day and age to actually not believe that the government is misusing and shifting billions of dollars into all sorts of projects and places, and even private funds of people where it's just being misused for private reasons, political reasons, all sorts of manipulative and very illegal reasons that most Americans would simply never go for. I'm in favor of getting that money back for every American that's working their butt off here, for anybody that is working hard here. That's my stance. My enemy is not somebody who's attempting to build a life here in any way, shape, or form. My enemy is not somebody who is another working class, in which, let's face it, even if you have hundreds of thousands of dollars coming in every year, like 200-300 or even above that, you're still in the working class to a certain degree. My enemy is the people that believe in elitism, that believe that the elites don't answer to anything and they live and they act like that. They are the ones running us into the ground. When it comes down to it, the only color they care about is green.
Now, he made a good example here about the climate change situation, right? Whereby, these don't eat meat, don't drink milk, don't take too many flights, but then they're flying on private jets. And, that's a comment I would have when I was working at one of these investment banks. I wouldn't word it like that, but I'd point out these kind of lots of questionable climate agenda, and certain other employees like super brainwashed, like we need to zero, and they had a friend who was doing a net carbon zero experiment in their personal life, not to consume any carbon or use any carbon, complete ridiculous stuff. But these are the people who are my managers, right? And it was clear they were genuine believers. They were diehard supporters of their regime. They weren't like just pretending to put on act, and they started swearing at me because I wasn't supporting all this net carbon zero nonsense, right? And this is the type of people who are management in major investment banks who are meant to be smart guys, smarter than you, and you need to follow and believe whatever they believe. But it's like, these guys are idiots. They can't think for themselves, and they'll talk down to you. You're the far right guy, you're the conspiracy theory guy, there's something wrong with you. So you become the problem, right? Because you have critical thinking skills. You're not going along with the narratives, right? You're not willing to be exploited. And then this is the type of people who rule over you, right? And I'll cover this in my other videos, but this is the type of demographic that rule over you. It's these guys, right? The guys with the, I don't know if it's on the left or right of your screen, depending on how the orientation is, but it'd be people, you can see these are politicians, right? These 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. About however many guys there are there, right? About 10 guys. So the 10 guys you see on your screen, there's a specific look, a specific archetype, self-righteous, preaching in the office, typical middle management look, senior middle management look, kind of psychopathic. You can tell from the look on their eyes, they're fake, superficial, pushing narratives that they might not believe in, but to maintain their position of power. You have guys like this, and this is the type of people I'd have to work with, or people be management over me, and you could just tell from the way they look. They're not good people, but they're posturing as good people, right? And I'll contrast them with someone else on the other side who you can tell from the way they look what their beliefs might be. There is something to be said about how you can judge people based on their looks. And same here, right? If you look on one side of the screen, I haven't got the best examples here because I don't really keep up with politics too much, particularly women in politics, because women in politics is a whole other thing. But there's a particular look of people who rule over you, which aren't necessarily the smartest or the brightest. But the whole point is that the system is taking advantage of you. It is rules for thee and not for me. These are politicians who are putting on a mask. Same thing with a lot of corporate management, and people are fed up of it. They're fed up of pretending, oh, the tax isn't high, the cost of living is quite high, the job salaries aren't increasing, I'm having to do more to get less out of my life day to day. And that's the thing, people have had enough and they're looking for a way out. And you see, there's so many articles every day of the government wasting your money on pointless, police are not stopping crime, but they're covering hate speech and saying any little thing you say could be the wrong thing, so we need to go and arrest you for a Twitter post. Or if a man is whistling at a woman running, then he should be arrested for harassment. It's completely ridiculous, right? So any type of critical thinking is now deemed something that should be censored. It's hate speech. It's then dropping out of society is dangerous. When women want to be strong and independent, is something to be praised because it fits with the establishment agenda of breaking gender relations, breaking the family structure, and reducing the birth rate, right? But when men do it, it's like, oh no, they're going to get together and overthrow the system, so that's a bad thing. So that's how they push these narratives. Now, this is the thing, right? When you look into people like Charlie Kirk, he wants to get men back ingrained in society, which is different from the message I'm preaching. I'm preaching the message where it's like, you want more power, pay, and freedom. You want to live more life on your terms. You don't want these companies exploiting you. So let me give you the rules of the game to help succeed there, because I've worked at Goldman, Morgan Stanley, other banks. I know how the game is played, right? So this is what I cover throughout my coaching. And If you go through some of my experience here, it's all there, LinkedIn description. So I know how this game works, right? Whereas guys, they're talking heads to push certain agendas, right? You can look into Palantir and these shady, questionable tech organizations who want to track everything you do and push CBDCs and things like that. These guys aren't necessarily good guys. They're just talking heads or a front for an establishment that you don't see. So the thing is, you don't owe loyalty to a system that doesn't pay you well, that taxes you highly, that wants to replace you, that ignores your value. And I help design the exit plan, right, throughout my career coaching, which includes videos, one-to-one sessions with me, a lot of me rewriting and helping you in your job search in terms of your resumes, your cover letters, your LinkedIn. So helping you develop an exit plan, right, with whether it's self-employment, looking for high-paying remote work, anything that gives you total freedom. And that's what I cover throughout my career coaching. So there's a link in description if you want to get started there with some real solutions rather than waste your time with talking heads like Charlie Kirk. Now, I have a course that can also help you with office politics. There's also a free ebook around career power and dealing with different career dynamics. Then I have a mailbox money newsletter, which is free career advice sent to your inbox twice a week. And so there's different solutions there, but the main one is the career coaching, how I can help you one-to-one with tailor-made solutions for you. So, like I say, link in description if you want to work on that. Let me know what you think about Charlie Kirk versus Steve James, this other smaller YouTuber, and their different perspectives here. And I'll see you in the next video.